Stephen's wondering why meaningful rather than useful. I think it's an interesting one.
Yeah, so I've heard the word useful a lot, and I don't like useful. It's very against the humanistic psychology spirit that I try to espouse these days. The point of life, according to humanistic psychologists, is to reach an end state of life where nothing is for anything else other than what it currently exists. And you can directly apprehend meaning, but as soon as you get to the word of utility or usefulness, you start thinking, well, what are things, and what use does it serve me? You're not fully appreciating and becoming absorbed in the thing. And you of all people, the flow guy, should know that the best way to stop you out of flow is to start thinking, like, is what I'm doing really useful to my goals? But that's the easiest way to just snap out of it. So I think meaningful, it captures the utility aspect of it, but it's something that I think is deeper and more meaningful, so to speak.
Interesting.
I like that.
I might even just quickly actually try the same question to Glenn on his domain.
Yeah.
So Glenn, what's gratitude? Very simply.
Gratitude, there's a lot of ways to define it. The more academic definition of gratitude that makes a nice place to start is that it's the feeling we can have when we receive something that comes at some effort or cost from someone and that fulfills a need for us. It could be a psychological need, a personal need, a Maslowian need, or a notorious SBK new Maslow need. That's a reference to his new work. But so it's this idea that gratitude, interpersonal gratitude, is a likely result when we get something that comes at effort that helps us out. What I think a lot of the time, I think there's varying degrees of gratitude. I think it's a very nuanced emotion. And I think that there are parts of gratitude that are similar for things if we receive a small gift, like somebody holding a door for us, all the way to someone giving us a kidney, of course. And gratitude, I think, in my telling, is very much tied into the feeling we have when we have a stressor that is removed due to the actions of another person, right? So I think gratitude and stress release can be, I think in its most powerful form, are very interweaved. And that's an important distinction, because oftentimes we're conflating gratitude with happiness, or gratitude, which is general positive feeling. And it's not to be taken like that. It should be thought of in its very nuanced way, where there's almost even an element of pain, not too much, but a little bit of pain and a little bit of that very deep vulnerability when someone really bails us out of a tough situation.
Interesting. Is there a difference between gratitude and appreciation, or is that just semantics?
It depends who you ask. So I guess that means it's semantics.
Right.
I think that, I think so. I mean, I think it's good to have a little resolution around these terms. I do. I think that it's not super important, but I think appreciation is more like, the sun is coming in through the window here very nicely, and I very much can have a moment of appreciation for that. You could just as easily call it gratitude, but I think appreciation, is a more general sense of, this is okay, as opposed to gratitude, which is the way the sun is reflecting off the roof tiles is quite beautiful to me. That feels more like gratitude. The general sense is more appreciation. And it's not actually super important unless it helps you resolve and label emotions accurately.
Yeah, otherwise there's no utility of the difference in terms.
Ryan, I'm going to jump in. You're going to have to translate my question for Scott.
Yeah, please.
So we have been at the Flow Research Collective, we've been working a little bit with Glenn at the front end of a long series of studies on flow and creativity. We've seen already in the early data a pretty strong correlation between people with a regular gratitude practice and people with high flow lifestyles. I was wondering about the relationship between gratitude and creativity.
Yeah, that's a great question.
For both of you guys. So please translate it over for Scott. Sorry, guys.
Scott, so we got another translation here. Stephen's wondering about the relationship between gratitude and creativity.
You know, the humanistic psychologist, I can't every answer is going to be like the humanistic psychologist, but they really talked a lot about creativity, and they also really talked about gratitude and the linkage between the two, because they very much link gratitude to openness to experience. Their idea of gratitude was more of like a witnessing, and more of a sort of being uninhibited by your prior expectations about something. And when you can actually get rid of all those insecurities and prior labels and thoughts and judgments about something, and we can just see something purely for what it is, the curious thing about that situation is we tend to find that gratitude almost automatically comes as a result, or appreciation, you know, and the most creative people tend to show that higher characteristic in what's called newness of appreciation. That was a phrase Abraham Maslow used, newness of appreciation, which is your ability to see something that you've seen a million times before, and every time you see it, it's just as beautiful as the last time you saw it. Or you see something that everyone has become stale to everyone else, and you still think it's beautiful, you know? And creative people tend to actually score higher in that trait.
Interesting. Glenn, you got any thoughts?
Glenn, what do you think?
Scott had a wonderful answer. I mean, I do think that I can't pull an exact research article in mind that has looked at creativity and gratitude that I know of per se. I just know personally, though, that as someone who likes to build and create things, that it's similar to what Scott was saying, that there's something amazing that I think is absolutely rooted in gratitude when we are creating and building something and we're seeing something that nobody else saw. It's inherently appreciative. It's inherently grateful to go, wow, I never thought that wood grain could look so beautiful, or that paint could lay across a canvas, or that a guitar could sound like that. And it's inherently grateful for the medium and the opportunity to create and affect something from one's own pursuits.
Is there also, do you think, potentially a causal relationship between gratitude into creativity? I know Sean Aker talks about positive affect and how that can heighten things like divergent thinking, which is obviously a big component of creativity. Do you think it can work that way as well, Scott? Where, you know, like increasing gratitude can potentially increase creativity?
Well, the emotions point is actually more complicated, because the research shows that those who are able to take seemingly contradictory emotions and be able to experience them at the same time actually are more creative. I wrote an article called the emotions, the complex emotions that make us more creative, for instance. So a lot of people tend to cordon off the good and the bad. You know, they'll take, you know, either, oh, wow, I love the moment, I'm so appreciative of the moment, or, oh, I'm feeling anger, I'm feeling anxiety. Creative people, my voice is cracked, but creative people tend to be really good at taking both, sitting with the contradictory emotions that they may be experiencing, and coming to a richer, deeper, meaningful interpretation of that emotion or that experience itself. They tend to not even think in sort of such black and white terms as even the way you asked that question, with all due respect.
So it's the range of emotion potential, like, that can lead to.
Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense to me.
Well, it makes perfect sense from the affect labeling literature, right? That people who can better put labels on their emotion tend to have a little better resilience, and tend to be a little bit less likely to develop depression. We see it in our data that emotion regulation ability doesn't correlate with overall average increase in gratitude. This is a little complicated, sorry folks, but it's not that people with higher vagal tone, or which we'll just refer to as an emotion regulation covariate, that people with this higher heart rate variability metric, loosely defined, they don't have more gratitude overall, they have a wider range of gratitude, right? Yeah. So there's something about this high definition gratitude. Yeah, that's this beautiful thing, and it ties in perfectly with that. And we actually have open-ended questions. We ask people, what did you feel alongside gratitude? And people put often all kinds of contradictory things in there. They'll put gratitude and bitterness, which aren't supposed to go together, sadness. But if you really pay attention to kind of the modern theory of emotion and how they can be constructed, it makes sense that it's really an infinite space. And I think the better we get a handle on that, the better we're able to take advantage of gratitude and its benefits.
Interesting.
Just out of curiosity, Ryan, you're gonna have to repeat this for Scott. Being that we're in a time of crisis, I just want both of your opinions right now on gratitude and creativity as strategies for kind of managing the current situation and our emotions and our performance in the current situation.
Cool. So Scott, Stephen's wondering basically, well, we can start with you and creativity and obviously any thoughts you've got on gratitude, but what the relationship is potentially, or any of your thoughts on the current time we're in with COVID-19 and creativity.
I really do think that the moment we're in is potentially an amazing opportunity for us to reach a depths of creativity we've never even known existed within us. And I phrased every one of those words carefully because I really do think that, at least when it comes to resiliency, we usually have deep reservoirs of resiliency that we didn't know existed until we're given that challenge. And actually vice versa, some of us talk the talk that we have all these reservoirs, and then when the time comes we don't have it. But we can put that aside for a second and say there's an awful lot of people where there are deep reservoirs we didn't know was possible. And I think the same with creativity. What you'll find is that a lot of people under these current conditions will have a lot of time to process things and to think a lot about what they've done in their life so far and what they want to make sure that they get a chance to do. You know, their priorities are going to snap into place in a lot of ways. You see this in a lot of the research on not only for the purpose research, but also the research on people who face their mortality through like a cancer diagnosis or something else, where all of a sudden they think about that, all their priorities shift. Their goal hierarchy, as one would say. And a lot of things that seem to matter before just don't seem to matter anymore. And you can see it now. You can see it on Twitter. You can see people are being kinder to each other. It warms my heart to see how the situation has brought so many people together. But I also think you will see creativity as a really nice outcome of a lot of this, because people will be doing a lot of meaning making that they've never done before. And I've always believed, and I argued in my book Wired to Create, which I wrote with the journalist Carolyn Gregoire, that that meaning making is the core engine of creativity. Oh, thanks, Stephen.
Interesting. It's super helpful, Scott. I think it's fascinating. Lots of our audience has been saying exactly that as well, that as soon as this hit 3 weeks ago, like instantly everything just got clear, and all of the humming and hawing or wondering about priorities or goals just crystallized, which I think is fascinating, especially from a psychological and neuroscientific perspective. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Glenn.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think this is a great moment for reflection, right? And in some ways, first of all, I want to say, and I saw something in the comments, and I just want to express my deep, compassion and empathy to folks who are dealing with some of the more severe consequences of the crisis. We're having a talk that I want to be a little light, hopefully a little silly, a little fun, as a bit of a relief. And I want to say that with that sensitivity in mind as well. I get a lot of heat now pivoting from that. I get a good amount of heat for talking about optimism and gratitude right now. And I understand it. I fully understand. Except that if we're clear about how we define gratitude and optimism, they stop being these overarching things we feel bad for not having enough of, and they begin to become mental tools. So my word of the day is actually antenna. So I just came up with
Wait a minute. You word of the day?
Yes, my word of the day today is antenna. And the word of the day, the reason antenna is the word is because an antenna's job is to detect invisible signals and transform them and make them visible. By practicing gratitude, what we're doing is we're building a gratitude antenna. It's not that there are some days where you're not going to get a lot of good signal. the key is that by practicing gratitude on a day-to-day basis, by writing things we're grateful for down, you're building your antenna sensitivity just a little bit more every day. And it's not that you're going to go from the worst terrible reception ever. There are some days where you're not going to get a very clear picture, but by tuning and building our gratitude antenna, it primes us to feel grateful on a more regular basis without self-judgment, with deep self-compassion for the moments when we are in pain and we have anxiety and grief. That gratitude is something that kind of comes alongside with that, and we don't berate ourselves for not having enough gratitude. I think that's extremely counterproductive.